Um, I struggle with Christmas a little bit. Always have. I have a very, very, very well decorated house for Christmas. I have one room in the house. I don't mean like that. I have an office in the house that when we redid, basically Jenna said, just shut up and let me do everything I want and you can have this one room, which I love. I mean, it's great. I got Disney stuff everywhere, Star Wars stuff. She doesn't bother a bit. And all the house is decorated. And then my office, I have signs that say like, humbug, the Grinch lives here. My new one this year is, I work hard so my cat can have a good Christmas. That was my new one this year. So I struggle sometimes during Christmas, and I also struggle, Neil and I were talking this morning, it's hard, different people who speak, do things different ways. Normally, when I am asked, have the opportunity to preach, usually it's based on something maybe I've seen on TV, or something that's happening in the world. And so, when I have to do something for Christmas, or New Year's or Thanksgiving or whatever it is, like a specific topic, I kind of struggle. I kind of feel like I'm typecast. What am I going to talk about? Okay. When I'm talking about the shepherds, how many people have talked about the shepherds? 1 billion, right? So I really was having a struggle deciding what to talk about this week, and I ran across this story that had absolutely nothing to do with Christmas, but it made me think about something with Christmas. It's a story about Thomas Jefferson, who in 1775, we're having a history lesson, went to an inn in New York City. And Thomas Jefferson, if some of you know, I think some of y'all maybe on your Washington trip have gone to his house. He was a farmer, okay? He was big into agriculture. And he, at this time, was in New York, and he was dressed like a farmer. In modern world, he had his overalls or whatever. But he was typecast as a farmer. And when he went to this swanky hotel in New York, the guy said, do you have any rooms? And Jefferson, dressed like a farmer, said, well, no, I don't have any rooms. And he had plenty of rooms. So he basically ran off Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson went next door to the other hotel, and they said, oh, Mr. Vice, he was the vice president at this time. Mr. Vice President, you can have the suite here, and, let me get you something to eat, and all this kind of stuff. Well, the guy in hotel number 1, he sees all the buzz next door, and they say, oh, Thomas Jefferson, the vice president's next door. And he says, oops. So he sends a letter next door and says, man, my presidential suite is bigger than this guy's presidential suite. I'm going to hook you up. Come on over. I got you the suite with the butler and everything else. And Thomas Jefferson, this is back before cell phones. I don't know if y'all remember this time. Thomas Jefferson texted him back. No, I'm just kidding. Thomas Jefferson sent a letter back next door that basically said, if your hotel is not good enough for the farmer Thomas Jefferson, it's not good enough for the vice president Thomas Jefferson. So that made me think about the story in the Bible, in Christmas, about no room in the inn. Okay, we're typecast. Now we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Hopefully a little bit different twist. A few things maybe we didn't know about it. So here we go. I'm in Luke 2, 1 through 7. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. That's the census. This census first took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So all went to be registered, everyone to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, the city of David, which is called, I don't know what it's called, a little town of Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was that while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. So she brought forth her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger. And here's the line, because there was no room for them in the inn. Y'all have all heard this? A few things. Luke tells us at this time that the world was basically under one government. Okay, so you had the Roman government who was the boss of everybody. And even though there was King Herod, y'all heard stories about King Herod, he really didn't have any power. He was somebody, the Romans came in, took over Israel, and basically told King Herod, you know, if you play ball, you can stay. So it's important to understand that there was one government in charge. And it's also important to remember that the Bible tells us when Jesus comes back later, there will be one government in charge. So keep that in mind. Now, when we read these verses, it's also important to understand that some things in the Bible, especially during the life of Jesus, are important because they were predicted earlier in the Bible. If you read the book of Isaiah, for instance, there's all kinds of stuff in Isaiah that you can buy books on, commentaries that basically says, you know, Isaiah, 19:6 said this, and here in Luke, Luke happened. Like, there's a scripture in Isaiah, by his stripes we are healed, and then later in the Bible, Jesus was whipped. So there's a lot of stuff going on that show us that God had a hand in all this, even way back. Part of that was they wanted a Messiah. They wanted a certain person, and so God had basically told them, at some point, you're going to get a Messiah, and this stuff's going to happen. And this was important because the Israelites, had many times in their history, had been beat, moved out of their homeland. So God kept telling them, I'm going to give you a Messiah, I'm going to give you a Messiah, and these things are going to happen. So in Micah 5:2-3, which is one of the prophets in the Old Testament, listen to this. It says, but you, Bethlehem, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will rule over Israel, whose origins are from the old ancient times. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. So now we see that maybe this decree that Caesar sent out for everybody to be registered, it was like a census, may not be a coincidence, right? Because right here, there is Micah that says at some point to have our Messiah, we got to get him from point A to point B. Now we know Jesus lived in Nazareth with his parents. So if he had been born in Nazareth, which probably would have made sense at the time, it's not going to jihad with the rest of the Bible. So that's another reason that some of the Israelites may have said, this Jesus guy, he's not the man. He's not it. I went to Sunday school, and they said in Sunday school, the Savior is going to be born in Bethlehem. And this guy was born in Nazareth, so this obviously isn't the guy. So sometimes I think things happen in the Bible for a reason, and sometimes it's because somebody back in the old days, even before this, had predicted it. Now, this is one of those times. Now, we all have a traditional view of this, right? When we read these Christmas stories, we kind of think about all the Christmas specials we've seen, all the pageants, all the Sunday school lessons, and we see, the story of Mary and Joseph, got to jump back from the Old Testament, going across the desert, right? And Joseph's got her on a donkey. Now, there used to, the donkey's got a name. Did y'all know this? When I was little, there was this Christmas special about the donkey. Does anybody know what his name was? Nestor. Okay, that's Nestor. If y'all don't remember anything else, the donkey was named Nestor. According to ABC in 1982, the donkey was named Nestor. So anyway, thank you. You can probably watch it on Netflix. They rode across the desert on Nestor and get to the end. And what happens in all the Christmas plays we've seen? What happens? They go up to the door of the Bethlehem Inn and they do this. what happens? The innkeeper comes out. It says, we have no room, slams the door in their face, right? So then Joseph probably comes back out. What do you want? I already told you we have no room. Sir, my wife is pregnant. She's about to be due. Well, what do you want me to do about it? Please, sir, anything you can do to help me, please help me. And he says, probably, what? Well, I have a nice stable out back, and obviously you people are not going to leave me alone, so you can go to the stable, right? We know this story. Maybe some of y'all during the Christmas play at some point in your career as a child were the ugly, mean innkeeper, right? History tells us that at the time all these people came to Bethlehem, it was a tiny town. About 500 people lived there. And about 2,000 or 3,000 people came there for the census, okay? So basically we were overrun. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. There's a few things in the Bible that are different than we think. Can y'all believe this? We were raised with something, we know a story, and there may be something actually different in the Bible. Can y'all imagine this happen? I've preached on this before. There's a great story where in the Garden of Gethsemane, a naked man's running around. Have y'all ever heard this story? I preached on that one time. Look it up. It's in the Bible. So there's sometimes that the Bible can be a little bit different. And one of these, I think, is the story of no room at the inn. For instance, number one, when we think of inn, okay, we're not talking about the Holiday Inn, okay? We're not talking about the Holiday Inn. There was basically two kinds of inns at this time. One is called a canvassari, okay? That comes from the word caravan. Y'all know what a caravan is. Back then, when people traveled, probably Mary and Joseph did not go across the desert with Nestor by themselves. Why? Treacherous, robbers, bad people. So probably at this time when they went across the desert, they had like a big group of people because they traveled for protection. There's animals that would eat you and robbers, all kinds of bad stuff. So the word caravanserai comes from the word caravan. And basically what these things were, this was not the Holiday Inn. They did not have Wi-Fi. This was basically a room with 3 walls and a dirt floor. Okay? And that's what they had back then for a quote-unquote inn. You had basically no furniture, no running water, obviously, no nice fluffy bed, nobody making you animals out of the towels like you see at some nice hotels. This was basically 3 walls and a dirt floor. You even had to bring your own sleeping bag or mat, okay? So, that's the inn number one. And we think about an inn being, you pull up at the Holiday Inn, what do? You check in, they give you a little swipe card now, right? And so that's not what this probably was. This was rustic, okay? Here's the other thing I do want you to realize when we leave here today, if nothing else, other than the Nestor thing. That's good trivia, don't forget that. We're back to our scripture. It says, so it was, while they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered. She brought her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn, period. Okay, guess what? There's no innkeeper in the Bible. This poor guy we have beat up for hundreds of years is not in the Bible. This poor guy, he didn't do anything. He hasn't done anything. I'll probably have the sign next to your office that says, quit acting like the innkeeper. He's not in the Bible. We have imputed this poor man to be the ugly person in the Christmas story, and he's not even in the Bible. Here's the reason most commentators think. Most commentators think he was not in the Bible because the inn in the Bible was not like the Holiday Inn, and it was not like one of these inns. Okay? Now, to put it in perspective, there are stories in the Bible where you go to one of these Holiday Inns. There's a story called the Good Samaritan. Y'all know this story? And a guy gets beat up, and several people go by, and one guy, the Samaritan, picks him up and takes him. And it says in the Bible, he took him to the inn, and what did he do? He dealt with the guy and paid him to take care of him. Y'all remember this story? It actually says he came, he gave him some coins and told him, look, feed him and make sure he's tucked in at night or take care of him until I get back. So that's one inn. Now the inn in the Bible that this is talking about, most people think was more like a guest room. Okay? When we have Christmas, what happens? Relatives show up, whether we want them here or not, right? And what do they want to do? They want to stay in your house, right? So most people think that the inn in the Bible was really, they went to Bethlehem and they had planned on staying at Joseph's cousin's house, or uncle, or auntie. Here's the problem with that. You had a town of 500 and you had 2,000 or 3,000 people there. So guess what probably happened? They got to the cousin's house, knocked on the door, and the cousin said, Cousin George got here before you. You're out of luck. Okay? And now, you could not, again, text or call and say, look, I know you really don't like Cousin George, so I need you to hold the room for me till I get there. Now, I know none of y'all ever done that. Some of y'all are smiling. I'm not going to call out anybody. But sometimes there are certain relatives you don't want to come, right? Right? Brenda will admit it. So, most people think that the inn was really, they got to the relative's house and there was no relative's house. So then we're at a position where we got no Holiday Inn available, and we got no relatives available. So they did the only thing they could was they went out in a manger or a cave, and Jesus was born. Now, this in our story always is seen as a bad thing, right? We got, again, they're tired, they're hungry, Mary's big pregnant, the innkeeper was mean to them, even though now we found out there's not even an innkeeper in there. This was really, I think, a blessing in disguise for a few reasons. Okay. Who, the mothers in the room, would like to give birth in a room with 3 walls, a dirt floor, and people all around you next door? Not fun, right? So this probably, in a practical sense, was good, okay? Because she had some bit of privacy, and the animals watched. I don't know if that's really good. Anyway, she had some privacy, okay? Nobody, I would think, would want to give birth, A, in Cousin Marv's house, or B, in this rustic place with nothing but a dirt floor. So there's some practical reasons why maybe being born in a manger was not the worst thing for her at the time. Now, I think more importantly, a few things I want to talk about is in a divine sense, I think it's very important that Jesus was born in a manger. And I'm going to tell you why. Number one thing I do want to point out is we're dealing with the Son of God, okay? Now, God obviously had set some of this stuff up, right? We talked about how the census was coming and God had made him go to Bethlehem. Now, we all know if God had wanted his son born in a palace, guess what happened? His son would have been born in a palace, right? He would have put stuff in place just like he did on the other way for his son to be born in a palace. So instead, he allowed his son to be born in a manger or a stable. And I think one of the reasons is he wanted to show Jesus' humility. He wanted to show Jesus' humility. Would it make sense that a person who died on a cross, penniless, was born in a palace? Would make sense. There'd be no humility. The other thing I think it was important is he wanted him to be born poor. He wanted him to be born poor. Why? Because if he was born into a palace or a nice place, the poor would not relate to Jesus. In the whole ministry of Jesus almost, he dealt with the poor and the lonely and the oppressed and the Gentiles and the sick. I mean, I could go on and on. But God wanted, I think, to make sure that his son was born in the lowliest conditions so that people in the lowliest conditions could relate to him. Okay? So, as we think about Christmas and as we think about there being no room for Jesus, it's important to understand that as Jesus went through his life, there was no room for Jesus as he grew up. Matthew 13:57. And they took offense with him. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home. And he did not do many miracles because of their lack of faith. The people in Jesus' town of Nazareth had no room for Jesus. Jesus would go there, they would blow Jesus off. They'd say, who is this guy? His dad is a carpenter. His dad fixed my roof after the sandstorm. Who is this guy showing up saying he's Jesus? We also learn that the religious leaders had no room for Jesus. That they rejected him because, A, he was not the Messiah they wanted. Who did they want? They wanted a king. They wanted a warrior. They wanted a guy that was born in the palace. And the religious leaders rejected him because he was not what they wanted. And because he was going and hanging out with, guess what? The people they didn't like. The people they didn't like. They rejected him because they didn't think he was enough of a Messiah. Just like we today sometimes reject people because we don't think they're enough of a Christian. Or we reject people because we don't think they meet the standards that we have. There was no room for Jesus with the story of the rich young ruler. Y'all know the story of the rich young ruler? He comes to Jesus and says, what do I need to do to get into heaven? And he says, I read the scripture, I go to Sunday school, I'm nice. And Jesus tells him what? Sell everything. Sell everything and then you can come in. And there was no room for Jesus with the rich young ruler because of his materialism. Because of his materialism. And there was really, the whole life of Jesus, no room for him in the world. John 1:10-12 says, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Now, this Christmas, with all of us in this room, and really all of us, period, Jesus is knocking. Okay? Just like his parents knocked on the door in the inn, or didn't knock on the door in the inn. And one thing that's important to remember, he's never going to stop knocking. There's so many people who, because of something in their life, or in their past, or in their circumstances, really think, I'm past the place where Jesus wants me. I'm past the point in my life where Jesus would bother knocking on my door. Revelations 3:20 says, here I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me. And imagine the times that Jesus has knocked on our hearts and our doors, and we've responded in a way different than opening the door. And sometimes I think we do this. Jesus knocks and we say the word that seems to apply to all of us right now. I'm too busy. I'm too busy. I hear that all the time from everybody, including me. I say it too much. Jesus, this Christmas, I'm too busy. I got all these presents I got to buy. I got all this stuff I got to wrap. I got to make dressing for my aunt's house. I got to run and buy, new Christmas lights for my yard. I'm too busy. I know you're knocking this Christmas, and I know I may have drifted away a little bit, but I'm just really too busy. And then sometimes we do stuff like, you know how when you're at home and somebody knocks on your door, and sometimes it's like a little kid selling something, and your first response is, now is just not a good time. Right? I might help you out, but now is not a good time. And we do that with Jesus a lot, right? We do that with Jesus a lot. We say stuff like, Jesus, I appreciate it, and you've done a lot for me, but right now where I am in my life, it's not a good time. I don't have time to spend with you right now. I don't have time to read the Bible. I don't have time to pray. I don't have time to rekindle my relationship with you. It's just not a good time. And then sometimes, Jesus knocks on our hearts and our houses, and we say stuff like, Jesus, I appreciate it, but it's too crowded in here right now. It's too crowded in here right now. You see all these people I got here? You see all these people. But really what we do is we let our hearts get too crowded sometimes with stuff, with problems, with worry, or we get to a point where we're too crowded with our past. And if the band will come up. So, what I want everybody to understand today is a few things.